I want you to imagine this for a second. You're standing in a room full of family, cameras out, people smiling, celebrating your mom's 75th birthday. A milestone, right? A moment that's supposed to feel warm, meaningful. Something you remember for the right reasons. And then, it happens. Someone asks her to say a few words. She looks around the room, starts naming people she loves, your siblings, relatives, even distant names you barely recognize. And then, she looks straight at you. Pauses, smiles, and says, "I'm sorry, remind me of your name again?" Now let that sink in. Not joking, not playful. She genuinely couldn't recall your name, and in that exact moment, while your chest tightens and your mind tries to process what just happened, you glance to the side, and you see your sister smirking. That little smirk. That quiet, knowing expression that says more than words ever could. That's exactly what happened to me, and what I did next wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it changed everything in that room. But before I tell you what I did, I need you to understand something important. Moments like that don't just hit you because of what's happening right now. They hit you because of everything behind them. Because for me, that wasn't just about forgetting a name. That was years of feeling overlooked, years of being the one who wasn't really seen the same way. Years of trying to prove something, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, consistent way that nobody seemed to notice. And if you've ever been in that position, you know how heavy that can feel. Because it's not about attention. It's about recognition. It's about feeling like you exist in the same space as everyone else. And actually, matter. Growing up, I wasn't the loud one. I wasn't the one who demanded attention. I wasn't the one people naturally focused on. I was the one who stayed in the background, and over time, that becomes a role. People start expecting you to stay there. They don't ask as much. They don't notice as much. And eventually, they stop really seeing you at all. And here's the part that connects to something deeper. Because when you're not seen externally, you start disappearing internally. You start doubting your value, your presence, your impact, and that shows up in your life in ways you don't always realize, especially when it comes to your health and fitness. Because if you don't feel like you matter, you don't prioritize yourself. You skip workouts. You don't take your nutrition seriously. You tell yourself it's not that important. Because deep down, you're not treating yourself like someone worth investing in. That was me. For a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't feel the urgency to do it. Until something shifted. Not overnight, not in one big moment, but slowly. I started showing up for myself, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just for me. And it started small, simple workouts, small changes in what I ate, building a routine even when I didn't feel like it. And here's what people don't realize. When you build discipline physically, it starts rebuilding you mentally. Because every time you show up, you send yourself a message. I matter. Every time you follow through, you build trust. And that trust turns into confidence. Not loud confidence. Not the kind that needs attention. But quiet confidence. The kind that stays with you, even when nobody else notices. So by the time my mom's 75th birthday came around, I was different. Not in a way people could easily see, but in a way I could feel. I was grounded. I was consistent. I knew who I was, even if no one else fully did. So when that moment happened, when she looked at me and couldn't recall my name, yeah, it hurt. Of course it did. I'm not going to pretend it didn't, because no amount of discipline makes you emotionless. But what discipline does is give you control over what you do with that emotion. And that's the key. Because in that moment, I had a choice. I could have reacted, gotten upset, made it about me, walked out, created a scene. Or I could have responded. And that's what I did. I paused. Just for a second, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to choose how I said it. And then I smiled. Not a forced smile, a real one. And I said, calmly, it's me, the one who's been here all along. And the room went quiet. Not dramatic, just still. Because what I said wasn't loud. But it carried weight. And I didn't stop there. I walked a little closer, kept my tone calm, and said, it's okay, I'm here. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in her, but in everyone watching. Because I didn't react with embarrassment. I didn't react with anger. I responded with presence. And that presence, it changed the energy. My sister's smirk disappeared because what she expected didn't happen. She expected me to shrink, to feel small, to stay in that role. But I didn't. I stayed grounded. And that's what caught everyone off guard. Because when people are used to a certain version of you and you show up differently, it disrupts everything. Now here's where this gets even deeper. Because later that night, I started thinking about it, not in a negative way, but in a reflective way. And I realized something important. That moment wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being seen differently. For the first time, not as the quiet one, not as the one in the background, but as someone who had presence. And that presence didn't come from that moment. It came from everything I had been building before it. All those workouts, all those routines, all those days I showed up for myself when no one was watching. That's what built that version of me. And that's why I always say, your fitness journey isn't just about your body. It's about who you become in the process. Because the discipline you build in the gym, the consistency you build in your routine, the control you build over your habits, it shows up in moments like that. Moments where you could easily fall apart, but you don't. Moments where you could react emotionally, but you choose not to. Moments where you prove to yourself that you're not the same person anymore. And that's what this whole story is really about. Not the birthday, not the moment, but the response. Because your response, that's your power. That's what defines you. Not what happens to you, but how you handle it. So if you're watching this right now, and you've ever felt overlooked, forgotten, like you don't really matter in certain spaces, I want you to understand something. You don't fix that by demanding attention. You fix that by building yourself. By showing up, by becoming someone who doesn't need validation, but naturally commands respect. And that doesn't happen overnight. It happens through discipline, through consistency, through doing the work, even when no one sees it. Because one day, you'll find yourself in a moment like that, a moment where everything slows down, and you'll have a choice to react or to respond. And if you've done the work, you'll respond in a way that changes everything. Just like I did, not loudly, not emotionally, but calmly, confidently, present. And sometimes, that's all it takes to show the room exactly who you've become.